Welcome to this YSL tutorial. In this video we're going to talk to you about how you can work with worksheets, charts and sheets in Excel VBA. We'll start the video by talking about the basics of working with sheets in VBA. So we'll tell you how you can refer to and move between sheets, how you can select single and multiple sheets, and then the difference between referring to sheets based on their sheet name, their code name and their index number. Once we've covered all the groundwork, we'll then move on and show you how you can manipulate sheets. So we'll do standard things like inserting and deleting sheets, including how to choose what type of sheet you insert and how many. We'll talk then about how you can copy and move worksheets, including between different workbooks. Show you very quickly how you can rename sheets, and then finish the video with a quick look at hiding and unhiding sheets, including a quick description of the very hidden worksheet type. So quite a lot to do. Let's get started. If you want to be able to move around in a workbook, it's essential to understand how to refer to, select or activate different sheets. Now there are several different ways for referring to the various sheet objects in a workbook, and a couple of different methods for moving to them. Let's start with a quick look at how you could move to a single specific named worksheet. We'll head into the VB editor. You can hold down the Alt key and press F11 on your keyboard to do that. And of course we'll need a new module in which we're going to write our code, so I can right click in the Project Explorer with the mouse, choose Insert, Module, and I'm going to rename my module as Mod Moving Between Sheets. We'll need a quick subroutine then, so I'll have a sub move to named worksheet. Hit enter a couple of times and tab once, and we're ready to start writing code. So for our example, let's imagine that we wanted to move to the Sheet 2 worksheet in our workbook. In order to do that, I first of all have to refer to the Sheet 2 object. And there are several different techniques for referring to a worksheet object. I'm going to show you one of the most common ones to begin with. So this involves referring to a collection in VBA, referred to as worksheets. I can do that fairly quickly and easily actually using the IntelliSense. If I press Ctrl and space on my keyboard and then look for the word worksheets in my list, I can select that and then use the tab key to type it in. Now worksheets is a collection which refers to all of the worksheet objects in the current workbook. To refer to a specific one, I can open a set of round brackets and double quotes and then type in the name of the sheet that I want to refer to. So Sheet 2 in this case, close double quotes, close round brackets, and then type in a full stop. And there are two methods I could use for moving to Sheet 2. The one I'm going to use is called Activate. So there's a simple way to move to a specific named worksheet object. Just to show you that this one works, let me just change the height of my screen a little bit so we can see Excel in the background. And if I were to step through this subroutine using the F8 key, each time I press F8 it moves to the next line of code. When I execute this line, we'll see that we move to Sheet 2, and there it is. So that's the first simple way to move to a worksheet. Now worksheets aren't the only type of sheet object you'll find in a workbook. You might have noticed as well that we have a chart sheet, and there's a sheet tab at the bottom there. It's called Chart 1. So we can do something very similar if we wanted to move to a specific named chart. Let's have a quick extra subroutine here, move to chart. And rather than use the worksheets collection, what I can do here is refer to a collection called charts. Again, if I use my IntelliSense list, we'll find the charts collection. And if I want to move to it, I need to first of all refer to it by name. So Chart 1, again in double quotes and round brackets, and then a full stop. And again, I can use the word activate or the activate method to move to that object. If I use F8 to step through, we should see that at the bottom again, we'll move to the Chart 1 sheet tab when that line executes. The worksheets and the charts collections can only hold objects of the respective type, so worksheets can only hold a worksheet and charts can only hold a chart. But there is a way to generically refer to any sheet tab using another collection simply called sheets. So we have a new subroutine here. I'm going to call that one move to any sheet. If I wanted to move to, say, Sheet 3, I know that it's a worksheet, but rather than referring to the worksheets collection, I can simply refer to a collection called sheets. Open brackets and double quotes, and then again the name of the specific object I want to refer to, sheet 3 in this case, and then .activate. And I can use sheets as well to refer to a chart sheet. So if I wanted to then subsequently move to chart 1, I can say sheets chart 1 .activate. So it's exactly the same syntax, it's just a shorter word to type in and a more generic way to refer to sheet objects. If I use F8 to step through this, again if we watch at the bottom of the screen we should see that we move first of all to worksheet 3 and second of all to chart sheet 1. Personally, I always think it's worthwhile being as explicit as possible when you're writing code, so I very rarely tend to use the sheets collection. I more commonly use worksheets when I'm referring to a worksheet and charts when I'm referring to a chart, but that's just a personal preference. So far we've used the activate method to move to each of our different sheets, but there is another method that you could use instead, called select. So if I replace the word activate with the word select in one of my previous instructions, and if I step through this code, you should again simply see that we move to the appropriate worksheet. So there we go. So select, when you're referring to single sheets, select has absolutely no difference to activate. They're completely interchangeable. One thing that you can do with the select method, which you can't do with the activate method, is you can use select to select more than one sheet at the same time. So to demonstrate that, let's have a quick extra subroutine down here at the bottom. We'll call it select multiple sheets. And I'm going to start in here by selecting worksheet 1. So I could of course use sheets to do this, but I'm going to use worksheets instead. So sheet 1 dot select. Once I've selected sheet 1, I then want to include sheet 2 in the selection as well. So I can then say worksheets, sheet 2, dot select again, but I have to specify an extra optional parameter for the select method. If I just executed these two lines one after the other, the selection would be replaced, so I'd select sheet 1 first, and then I would simply go on and select sheet 2. So what I want to do in the second time I select a sheet is I want to set a parameter called replace to a value of false. So the word false here tells Excel not to replace the current selection, so what it will do instead is extend the selection. If I step through the routine again now using the F8 key, we'll see that we've gone to sheet 1, and when I execute this line now select sheet 2 without replacing the selection, you might just be able to make out at the bottom of the screen that it extends and includes sheet 2 in my selection as well. That's probably a little bit easier to see actually if I show you that I am now in group mode in Excel. So you see the word group whenever you have more than one sheet selected. So there you go, that's how you can use the select method rather than the activate method to select more than one sheet at the same time. So far we've referred to all of our sheet objects by name, but that's by no means the only way to refer to a sheet object, and indeed some cases it might not be the most reliable way either. So if I execute my move to named worksheet subroutine again, that will move to sheet 2. But if sheet 2 didn't already exist, what if somebody had gone into Excel and they'd renamed sheet 2 as something else? I didn't actually mean literally, but I ended up typing it in literally anyway. If I go back to my VB editor again, and I try to execute the subroutine which selects sheet 2, I'll find that it fails, because sheet 2 doesn't exist anymore. So I get the standard runtime error message, subscript out of range. I could click debug to show me the line that had caused the problem, but I already knew that anyway. So what I'm going to do is stop running the subroutine by clicking the reset button. So if we're not going to refer to worksheets by name, or if that can be unreliable, what other techniques have we got available? Let's have a new module to demonstrate the various ways to refer to worksheets. So I'm going to insert a module, I'm going to call it mod referring to sheets. And a quick subroutine in here, methods for referring to sheets. Let's start with a quick reminder of the basic way that we've been using so far. So if I'm going to refer to a worksheet, let's say worksheets sheet 1. So that's going to refer to a worksheet by name. Another technique you can use for referring to a worksheet is to refer to them by an index number. So most collections, nearly every collection in VBA is indexed, and that is the items in the collection are given a number. So for worksheets, the collection is indexed from left to right. So sheet 1 in my case, because it is the first worksheet, that's worksheet 1. Sheet something else is worksheets 2. And sheet 3 is worksheets 3. So if I wanted to refer to my second worksheet, I could refer to it as worksheets, open parentheses, and then simply type in the index number of the object that I want to refer to. And if I say .select, that will then select that object. So if I use F8 to step through at this point, we should see that when I execute this line, we move to sheet 1, and there it is. And when I execute this line, it moves to the something else sheet, because it's the second one in the collection. If you're going to use index numbers to refer to sheets, you do need to be much more careful about which collection you're referring to. So for instance, if I wanted to refer to sheet 3 using an index number, if I'm using the worksheets collection, then I would use the number 3. If I was using the Sheets collection, however, the Sheets collection contains all of the sheet tabs, chart sheets included. So what I would need to do is refer to Sheets 4. So just to demonstrate that, Worksheets Sheet 3, sorry, beg pardon, Worksheets 3, and then Sheets 4 would refer to the same objects. So if I step through the routine again, Worksheet Sheet 1 will select Sheet 1, Worksheets 3 will move to Sheet 3, and then sheets 4, if I can actually just quickly demonstrate this by manually selecting a different worksheet first, sheets 4 will also select sheet 3. So it can be potentially quite confusing, but just make sure you're aware of which collection you're referring to if you're going to use the index numbers to refer to and select sheets. Now, using index numbers to refer to sheet objects can be just as unreliable as using the sheet names themselves. What if somebody moved your worksheets around, or inserted new sheets or deleted sheets? The numbers you've used previously might not refer to the worksheets you're expecting the next time you run the code. So there's one final method I'd like to look at for referring to sheets in this video, and that's using code names to refer to sheets. And this is absolutely the most reliable way to refer to any sheet object. Now, one thing you might not realize about worksheets and chart sheets in Excel is that they actually have two different names. So you'll be familiar with the tab name of a worksheet, one that you've used in Excel, but each worksheet and each chart sheet has a code name as well. It's easiest to demonstrate if I select the one that I've already changed the name of, so sheet 2 as it's called here, which I've labelled as something else. If I select that object in the Project Explorer and look at the Properties window, you'll find that at the top of the Properties window is a property called Name, just like the name of a module as we've been renaming those objects. But also, further down is the name that we've given it in Excel itself. So you can actually change this second name property here, the tab name, to anything at all. And you'll see that when you hit enter, it updates the sheet tab name in Excel. The second name that we have here, the name that's listed at the top, is the code name of the worksheet, and you can use that code name directly in your VBA code. So if I said sheet 2, that's a direct reference to that object. I can type in a full stop, and I'm even presented with the IntelliSense, so I don't have to guess anymore about which methods and properties I have to use. So sheet2.activate will simply do that. If I use F8 to step through the routine, you'll find that it activates the sheet whose tab name is called anything, but in VBA terms, the object name, the code name, is sheet 2. There's absolutely no reason you have to stick to the default names, by the way, either. If sheet 2 is fairly meaningless, and sheet 1 and so on, sheet 1 I might perhaps want to label with a name that describes what the data contained in it. So it's the top 13 films, So if I go back to the VB editor, select sheet 1 in the Object Explorer, the Project Explorer, I can change the name of the worksheet to anything that I want in the name property. You'll often find people precede the worksheet names with a 2-letter code or a 3-letter code, sometimes SH or SHT for sheet. I tend to use WS for worksheets. Again, I try to distinguish between charts and worksheets. So WS movies, perhaps, let's call it WS movies. And again, once you've named that object in the Project Explorer, you can then simply refer to that object name in code as well. So WS movies.activate, I know that that will reliably always take me to that worksheet. The advantage, I guess, is here that it's very, very unlikely that your end users would come into the Visual Basic editor and start changing the names of your worksheet objects, whereas I might still want to change the sheet names. That's not a problem anymore, because the sheet name is irrelevant to what your code is actually doing. So we've seen various ways to select and refer to worksheets and chart sheets. What other things can we do to them? Well, if you right-click on a sheet tab in Excel, that'll give you a good idea about the various things we can do to sheets in VBA. We can insert new sheets, delete old ones, rename them, etc., etc. So let's start with a quick look at how you can add new worksheets and then rename the sheets that you've just added. We'll head back to the VB editor to do this, and I think we'll have a new module as well. So we'll insert a module, and I'm going to call it mod inserting sheets. And a quick new subroutine at the top, sub add new sheets. Okay, so the simplest way to insert a new worksheet is to start by referring to the Worksheets collection. I can do that using the IntelliSense list, and then simply say that you want to apply the add method to the Worksheets collection, so worksheets.add. If I step through this using the F8 key, we'll see that when I execute this line of code, the new worksheet appears to the left of whichever one is currently selected. So when I hit F8, I'll get a new sheet to the left of, in this case, the movie list sheet. Okay, so inserting a new worksheet is fairly straightforward, but what if you wanted a bit more control over where your worksheet appeared? The key to doing this is using some extra optional arguments of the add method. If I type in a space after that, it exposes a tooltip which shows me that there are 4 optional arguments for this particular method. The ones I'm interested in here are the before and after arguments. Each one of these allows you to pass in a reference to another worksheet or indeed a chart sheet. So let's say that I wanted my new worksheet to appear to the left of sheet 3. I'm going to specify that the before argument is a reference to worksheets sheet 3. Try that again, sheet 3. And if I step through this code now, you should see that the new worksheet, when I execute this line, appears to the left of the one that I've referred to here. So there it goes, I've got a new worksheet to the left of the one that I've referenced in the before argument. Now the after argument works in a very similar way, but you can only specify either the before or the after argument, not both. So if I wanted to modify this line of code so that it inserts a sheet after sheet 3, what I can do is change this argument into the after argument. One technique for doing that would be to simply type in commas, and hopefully you can see from the video that if I type in a comma, it skips over the before argument and goes to the after argument, so you can see that the after argument is highlighted in bold. Sometimes that can get a little bit confusing, just using simply commas to skip over arguments. Sometimes it's actually better to name the argument that you're trying to specify. So what I can do instead here is actually write out the word after, followed by a colon and an equal sign, and that also now specifies the after argument. So if I use F8 to step through this line of code again, we should see that the new worksheet now is inserted after sheet 3. And there it is. Now what if you wanted a system that always inserted your new worksheets either at the start of the sheet list or at the end of the sheet list? We can do that too, and again we'd use the before and after arguments to control it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new line to my subroutine, which is going to add one worksheet at the beginning of the worksheet list and one worksheet at the very end. So for the first line, I'm going to insert this before referencing the before argument here is actually a little bit unnecessary, but I do this for the sake of completeness. I want to insert this before the very first sheet in my collection. Now, earlier on we looked at the idea of referencing worksheets or sheet objects by their index number, and we know that the first worksheet always has index number 1. So if I write a line of code which says add a new worksheet before the first sheet in the index, that will always appear as the new first worksheet. And we can use a similar trick to insert a worksheet at the end of the sheet list. Now, the difficulty here is that you don't always know what the index number of the last sheet is. And in fact, if I've just inserted one worksheet on this line, then the index number will have changed by the time I reach this line. So a neat little trick is to reference not a specific number, but a property of the sheets collection. If I reference the sheets collection here and then type in a full stop, you'll find that it has a property called count, and count always tells you how many objects there are in that particular collection. So if I say insert a new worksheet after the sheet whose index number is equal to the count of all of the sheets, that will ensure that it always gets added at the end of the sheet list. So let's use the F8 key to step through this routine. When I execute the first line, I should find a new sheet appears at the start of the sheet list, and there it is. And the next sheet will appear at the end of the sheet list. I might just need to tweak that so you can actually see it appear. When I hit F8, there it is. And it doesn't matter how many times I run this line will always make a worksheet appear at the start. This line will always make a worksheet appear at the end. Now, it's also possible to insert more than one worksheet at the same time. So I can use another of the optional arguments of the add method to specify that. Let me just get rid of the line which inserts a sheet at the beginning of our list, and I'd like to now insert 3 new worksheets at the end of the list of worksheets. So I need to specify another argument of the add method. If I type in a comma after the after argument, I can see that I've now got a selection of other arguments, and the one that I want to use here is called the count argument. So I'm going to say count : equals, and the number of worksheets that I wanted to add is simply 3. If I step through this routine using the F8 key, and again I'll just tweak this this view so you can see the new sheets appear. When I run this line of code, you should simply see that 3 new sheets get inserted at the end of the list in one go. So it's as simple as that. Now, as well as inserting new worksheets, you can also insert new chart sheets. So let's have a quick extra subroutine called add new charts, and we'll show you how you can do that too. So there's a couple of different techniques that you can use to do this. We could, as we've done by referencing the specific worksheets collection, we could reference the specific charts collection and simply say charts.add. I'm going to specify where the new chart will go, again using the, I'm going to use the after argument. So I'm going to say after : equals, and I'm going to refer to charts, chart 1. So that will insert after the chart sheet called chart 1. Now, it's also possible to use the generic sheets collection to do this. So let me reference the sheets collection, and I want to say sheets.add. Now, this in effect has exactly the same effect as worksheets.add. If you don't specify any extra arguments, when you say sheets.add, it inserts a new worksheet to the left of whichever sheet is currently selected. But there is another extra optional argument that I haven't mentioned yet, the type argument. Type lets you control which type of sheet you're going to insert into your collection. So I'm going to reference the type argument and say : equals, and if I look for Excel sheet type dot, that gives me an idea of the types of worksheets that I can reference. So this is an enumeration, Excel sheet type. There are several specific options I'm allowed to select for this particular argument. So I wanted to insert a chart. I'll use the reference to Excel chart. So both of these two lines of code now will insert a new chart sheet. If I use the F8 key to step through, this first line will insert it directly after chart 1. And there it is. Now, when I execute this line of code, it's going to insert a new chart sheet, and it's going to insert it to the left of whichever sheet is currently selected. And in this case, it happens to be the chart that I've just created. So I should see a new chart get inserted to the left of chart 2. And there we go. So that's how you insert new charts. You can just use the Sheets collection, sheets.add, in place of worksheets.add or charts.add, but it's always worthwhile specifying which type of object you're then going to insert. Okay, so now that we've seen how to insert sheets, let's have a look at how we can delete them as well. Let's insert a new module for this. I'm going to right-click somewhere in my project and choose Insert Module, and I'm going to call my new module Mod Deleting Sheets. The subroutine that I'll add in there will be called, or the first subroutine at least, will be called Delete Specific Sheets. And I'm going to start by deleting Worksheet Sheet 5. So again, to do that, I need to refer to the specific object I want to refer to. So Worksheets, open parentheses and double quotes, Sheet 5, and then close quotes, close parentheses, followed by a full stop, and I simply want to apply the delete method. So when I use F8 to step through this routine, I'll find that when I execute this line of code, what will happen is, just as though you're going to delete this yourself manually in Excel, you'll get a little warning that there may be data in the sheet that you are deleting, and you have to click the delete button for that action to take place. You should see that sheet 5 has now disappeared. So when I hit F8 again just to end the subroutine, that one has now been deleted. Now, if I was deleting lots of worksheets in the same subroutine, it could be quite annoying to have to click delete every single time I try to delete a sheet. So let's show you how you can turn off those little warning messages. Before I try to delete a new sheet, in fact what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete sheet 1 in this example. Before I try to do that, however, I'm going to turn off the warning messages. So to do that, on the line above the one which deletes the worksheet, I want to refer to the application object. So I press Control and Space to display the IntelliSense, and there's a reference to application. Dot. What I want to do is change the display alerts property to be equal to false. So that means that the alert messages won't appear when I perform any actions that normally would make them appear. It's worthwhile resetting those at the end as well. So after I've tried to delete a sheet, I'm going to say application.displayalerts equals true. That makes sure the warning messages will be reset, so they will be in effect after the subroutine is finished. So when I hit F8 to step through this routine, you won't see anything exciting happen here when I execute this line, but when I choose to delete a worksheet now, you should simply see that the worksheet disappears with no warning messages, and then the warning messages are reset for later on. When you've written a subroutine which deletes a specific named worksheet, you do have to be careful about how many times you run it, because of course once I've deleted the sheet 1 object once, I can't run it again to delete the same object. That object no longer exists. So when I execute the line, I get a runtime error, again the standard subscript out of range, when I try to refer to an object which no longer exists. I'm going to end that subroutine. What I'd like to do in this example is delete whichever sheet is the last sheet in the entire list. So instead of referring to the Worksheets collection, I'm going to refer to Sheets. And instead of referring to a specific named object, I'm going to refer to the index number of the last worksheet. And I'm going to use the same trick that I showed you earlier on, whereby I can count the number of sheets in the Sheets collection and pass that value in as the index number of the sheet that I'm referring to. So when I use F8 to step through this one now, I should see that whichever is the last worksheet will be deleted. It happens to be sheet 9 in this case. And I can run this routine as many times as I like. If I just click the play button a few times, it will delete each time. It will delete the last worksheet in the sequence. It applies to chart sheets as well. If I keep on going a little bit further, so I've deleted all the worksheet objects up to that point, the last sheet object now is a chart. If I execute that, it will delete the chart sheet as well. One final way I'd like to show you to delete worksheets or charts is by deleting the entire collection in one go. This is the frightening one. I'm going to write a simple extra subroutine here, sub delete all charts. And what I'm going to simply do is say charts dot delete. I could also say here worksheets dot delete. And what that line of code does is deletes every single object in the collection that I've referred to. Now, in order to make this work, you probably know already that each Excel workbook must contain at least one sheet, either a chart or a worksheet. So if you're going to do this, you must make sure that there is at least one worksheet if you're deleting charts, or chart if you're deleting worksheets. I hope that makes sense. Frighteningly now, when I execute this subroutine, bear in mind that I haven't turned off the warning messages. If I execute that line, if I simply click the delete button here, it deletes, hopefully you can see, all of the objects in the collection that you've referred to. And of course, because you will hopefully already know that you can't undo what a macro does, you can't get those objects back either. That's potentially quite terrifying if you do that by mistake, but really powerful to avoid having to delete each worksheet or chart sheet one by one by one. Okay, so we've seen how to insert and delete sheets. Let's have a look now at how you can copy and move them. Let's create a new module for this. I'm going to insert a new module and I'm going to call it Mod Copying and Moving Sheets. Let me make sure I can spell that properly. Copying and Moving Sheets. And what I'm going to do in there is, first of all, create a subroutine called Copy Sheets. If you've been following this so far and you've been thinking that it's fairly easy to guess the add method and the delete method, you won't be surprised to find that if I want to copy a worksheet, and in this case I'm going to make sure that I copy the worksheet called WS Movies, you're probably not surprised to find that to do that you simply apply the copy method. And again, a lot like the add method, you can choose where your worksheet is copied to. So if I type in a space after the copy method, I see again I get the before and after arguments. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to copy my movies worksheet so that it sits after the anything worksheet. So I'm going to say after : equals worksheets anything. And again, I could have referred to this with this worksheet in a variety of different ways, but I just wanted to sort of mix and match so that you're happy with interchanging these styles of references. So if I use the F8 key to step through this, when I execute this line of code, somewhat unsurprisingly, I get a copy of my movie list sheet after the anything sheet. Notice it has the generic names with a number in parentheses, just as if you'd copied this yourself manually in Excel. Now you might have noticed that the arguments for the copy method are optional, and in fact if I delete the after argument here and type in a space after the copy method again, the reason you can tell that they're optional is because the argument names are contained in square brackets. So before and after are both optional. So what happens if I don't specify where my new copy should go? This is a bit more complicated than just what happens when you insert a new sheet. Excel doesn't just insert the new copy to the left of whichever sheet is currently selected. What actually happens, and you can see if I step through this routine, what actually happens is Excel chooses to create a brand new blank workbook and insert your copy of the worksheet into that. You might see here in the Project Explorer, I've got a new workbook called Book 4, and if I switch into that workbook, there it is, a brand new blank workbook with one copied worksheet in it. So that's quite powerful. I'm certainly worthwhile knowing that you can simply generate new workbooks by copying any worksheet into it. If you have more than one workbook open, it's also possible to send your copy to a specific workbook as well. So what I can do here is I can say wsmovies.copy, and I'm going to say to place the copy before workbooks. The workbook that I want to refer to is actually the one that's just been created. It's called Book 4, and we're going to have a slightly longer video about how to work across multiple workbooks and do things like opening and closing and saving, but just for now know that you can refer to a workbook by referring to the workbooks collection and then the name of the workbook in parentheses and double quotes. The same syntax effectively as how you refer to a worksheet or a chart sheet. Within that workbook I then need to refer to a specific sheet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to sheets 1. So what will happen is my movies worksheet will be copied into the Book 4 workbook and it will be placed before the first worksheet in that list. So if I execute this code now and switch back into Book 4, in fact you can see it down at the bottom of the screen there, you should see that I've got a new copy before the original one. So that's how you copy files or worksheets from one workbook to another. Now moving sheets works in almost exactly the same way as copying them. Let's have a quick new subroutine called moving sheets. And as you'd expect, if I refer to the worksheet that I want to move, I'm going to use WS Movies again, I can simply say .move. just like the copy method works, there are two extra optional arguments where I can specify before or after. If I omit both of those arguments, the worksheet will be moved into a brand new blank workbook. But I'd like to move my worksheet so that it sits at the end of my current list of sheets in this workbook. So I'm going to say wsmovies.move, and I'm going to say to place it after colon equals sheets.count. And when I execute this using F8 to step through, I should see that the movie list sheet now sits after all of the other sheets in this workbook. All of the other optional arguments are available as well, just like we saw for copying. So again, as I said, I can miss out all of the arguments to move the sheet to a new workbook, or I could specify to place it in an existing open workbook, just as I have done here with the copy method. Okay, so next let's have a quick look at how you can rename a worksheet. I'm going to have a brand new module for this, so I'm going to right click and insert a module. I'll call it mod rename sheets, and a quick subroutine in here called sub rename single sheet. It's going to be a fairly short subroutine as it turns out. What I'd like to do is assign a new name to the movie list worksheet. Now when I talk about the name, remember earlier on we saw that there are two names for a worksheet object. There is a tab name, so a standard name that you see in Excel, movie space list, and there's also a code name. In this case it's called WS Movies. Now you can't write code to change the code name, but you can write code to change the name or the tab name or the sheet name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to refer to WS Movies, I'm going to change its name property, and I'm going to make it equal to something else. Again, literally something else. So if I execute this code now, what you should see when this line is executed, the name movie list is replaced with something else. And there it is. Now one thing to be careful of once you've done this, of course, is that if you had any previous code which referred to Worksheets movie list, which is its old name, that code would no longer work. So again, this is why it's so worthwhile using the code names of objects rather than things that users could easily change themselves. Okay, so for the very final part of this video, we're going to talk quickly about how you can hide and show worksheets. So again, I'm going to have a brand new module for this. I'm going to call it mod show and hide sheets. And then in there, we'll have a really simple subroutine called sub hide movie sheet. Simple property is used to change the visibility of individual sheets. If I refer to WS Movies, a lot of people tend to guess that if I want to hide a worksheet, you'd apply the hide method to it, which is a reasonably good guess, but unfortunately that's not how it works in Excel VBA. If I want to hide a worksheet, what I actually have to do is change a property called visible. Now, surprisingly, the visible property has three different possible states. There's hidden and visible, and there's also this intriguing sounding one called very hidden. Now let me start by using Excel sheet hidden first of all. If I execute this code now using the F8 key to step through, what I should find is that my WS Movies, which is now called something else, will be hidden and is gone. I can head back to Excel, and if I now right-click on any other sheet and choose Unhide, you should find that my invisible something else sheet is in the list. I'm not going to use the dialog box to redisplay it. What I'm going to do is go back to my code and simply change this property here to have, rather than Excel sheet hidden, backspace that, if I press Control and space, I can redisplay my IntelliSense list. I'm going to choose Excel sheet visible and run the code again, and my sheet now becomes visible again. It's worthwhile mentioning that I could have done this as well using the Properties window. If I select WS Movies, you'll see that its visible property is available here as well. I can change it to Excel sheet hidden, and it's gone. I'm going to have to reselect it again now and change that back to Excel sheet visible again, and now it reappears. So those are the two fairly obvious ones, visible and hidden. What's this very hidden thing all about? Let me get rid of that and press Control space to redisplay my IntelliSense list, and I'm going to look for Excel sheet very hidden. If I execute the code, again you'll find that the something else sheet or WS Movies disappears from view. But this time, if I'm back in Excel and I right-click on a Sheet tab, Excel doesn't think that there are any hidden sheets. There's nothing now to unhide. So your end users would not know that any very hidden sheets were even in or part of your workbook. The only way to redisplay that worksheet is to use code. So if I switch back to the Visual Basic Editor, again, I can either do this from the Properties window, or I can do it from code as well, make the sheet, Excel sheet, visible, run the subroutine, and something else reappears and is available to the user again. So there we go. We've had a good look at how you refer to worksheets, how you move between them, how you insert and delete them, copy and move, rename, and finally show and hide them. There aren't many other things I can think of that you would want to do to worksheets in Excel, so that certainly covers all the basics, and hopefully you've found that useful. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this training video, you can find many more online training resources at www.wiseowl.co.uk.